Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Nutrition Intervention Show. I'm your host, Denise Voight, functional medicine nutritionist, and I'm super excited to introduce you to today's guest, Dr. Afrouz Demeri. Dr. Demeri is a licensed, board-certified naturopathic physician and also an Institute for Medicine certified practitioner. As faculty and director of functional medicine at the University of California, Irvine, she sees patients at the Susan Samuli Integrative Health Institute and in her private practice in Newport Beach, California, where she finds the root cause for hormonal imbalances, thyroid disorders, stress, weight, and digestive issues, fatigue, depression, and anxiety. Clearly, Dr. Demeri is a wealth of knowledge, and we are super lucky to have her here today to share some of that information. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Demeri.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. So I would love for you to start with just sharing with us a little bit about you and your background and what prompted you to become a healthcare practitioner.
So I grew up in Iran with my grandmother being a herbalist. She had basically a herb for every ailment. So we grew up very holistically. There was always a tea if we had a tummy ache, if we had a headache, if we had periods that were painful. So I obviously went to the doctor. I got my vaccines. I was on antibiotics for ear infections, but I always knew that food and herbs and lifestyle and nutrition were very important because of the way she raised us. Then fast forward, we moved to Australia, then Canada, and now I'm in the US, and life is very different. Fast food, Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's. I mean, I remember thinking, wow, this is such cool stuff because we were poor and we didn't have that. And my diet changed. I kind of lost that grandmother's herbal medicine, until I was pre-med studying, wrote my MCATs. I always knew I wanted to be a doctor. But I was very sick. I had chronic migraines, yeast infections, fibroids, ovarian cysts, and was put on birth control pill basically for all of those and told that that would fix everything. And I wasn't better. I gained weight. I was more anxious, lived on coffee, kind of pre-med, staying up late just to get my, boards done. And as I was sick, my boyfriend at the time, had someone come from Italy who was a doctor, but in Europe, I guess they're trained more in holistic ways on top of the conventional medicine ways. And they said, why don't you go see her? And she was a naturopathic doctor, and I'd never heard of such a thing. I was like, a natural what? And she spent an hour and a half with me, took my whole case. Like, no one had spent that much time. Usually I walked into my doctor's office and he was writing a prescription before I even said two sentences. And
Yeah.
I was just blown away at the detail of, like, what are your relationships like? How are you feeling? Why are you working so hard? Why are you not sleeping? What's motivating you to even become a doctor? Like, you're destroying yourself. And when do you get your migraines? Are they before your period? Or is that how they started? And how are you feeling on the pill? Let's look at the functioning of your organs, not just blood tests that typically don't tell you how they're functioning. So I was just so blown away, and she literally got me off the pill, I haven't had a migraine since, and changed my diet. I realized the things I was eating, I was very sensitive to, especially dairy. And, I always grew up with milk. Like, milk and bread is like in Iran, that's what we had every single day. And anyways, fast forward, I was like, I want to do what you do because you have helped me in a way that no one else has. And I completely abandoned medical school. I had just applied, and it just chose me. I had no idea what it was. And so I flew from West Coast to East Coast, left my family to go into 4 years of naturopathic medical training after my Bachelor of Science. And then what happened was I got married, and I always wanted to have kids. I wanted 10 babies. I was like,
Oh, goodness.
yeah, crazy.
Oh, my.
I love kids. Like, even when I was 9, I remember wanting to be a mom. I couldn't wait to have children. And I had an early miscarriage, a chemical pregnancy, and I didn't think anything of it. I was young, I was pretty healthy. We were renovating a house at the time, and I got pregnant, and I didn't even do the genetic testing because I was like, why? Why do I need to do genetic testing? I'm going to be fine. I was young, and I will have whatever God wants me to have anyways. I'm not going to have an abortion. And my daughter had many, many health issues, and that's when, after the seventh eye surgery at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto, I thought of, and I coined the term trimester zero, because I realized no one looks at things before you get pregnant. Everyone changes their life as soon as they become pregnant. They start eating healthy. They start asking, oh, what should I be doing? Should I be taking prenatal? Should I take a supplement?
Right.
But it's too late. Things have already been done. Most of that child's entire life has been set when that egg and that sperm meet. Of course, those 9 months are important and things can change epigenetically, but I realized the OBGYN that I saw at the time, and this is just how they're trained. First of all, no one looks at the men. So if he's smoking, if he's like drinking alcohol, if he is vaping and, using weed every night to sleep or on medications, no one cares. It's always about the female, right? Which is why, and now we see 40 to 50% of infertility is male factor. But it's not about infertility. It's about having a healthy child. And that's what trimester zero is really about. I am passionate now because I don't want what happened to me to happen to other people, even though she's my angel and has taught me so much, and I would have her 1,000 times over and over again, which is so funny because most miscarriages occur because of what she has. But this little feisty one wanted to come, and she did not let me miscarry her, and I'm so happy. But I was terrified to have another child. I was like, I can't have this happen again, and I was done. I'm like, we're not having any more kids. But the more research I did on mercury and mold and toxins and BPA and diet and dairy and inflammation from the foods you're eating, and I was like, there's so much research out there. Why aren't there no one specializing in this field? And an OBGYN's role is to make sure you get pregnant and have a baby. Then they're done.
Right. Yeah.
They pass you along to the pediatrician, and the poor pediatrician, they're the one that have to deal with the asthma, the autism, the Asperger's, the cancers, the leukemias. And so 20 years ago when I was in school, we had a lot of peds that we would see for skin and asthma and like all these things that I'm telling you, and some autistic kids and some Asperger's. But now, like, the amount, every other person I meet has an unhealthy-ish child or a very severe unhealthy child. And so it's important to look at this phase 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, even a year before you start to have a baby. We would never buy a house without looking at the foundation of the house, right? And doing a home inspection. But like, no one does a home inspection on us before we conceive. If anything, maybe we'll get like some basic blood test done on the female, right? That's kind of like going into a house and just looking at the bathroom and saying, yeah, I'll buy this house. Like, the bathroom looks good.
Right.
Coming up with crazy analogies today, but you get the point.
Totally.
And looking at sperm quality now, I see like that's a huge part of miscarriages, and half of the DNA of that child is coming from dad. And so I'm on this mission to awaken everyone and teach them how to speak to fathers and their partners. I have so many women in my course who are saying like, well, my husband was told he's fine. So they continue their lifestyle, and there's all this pressure that they're eating all organic and change their beauty products and aren't dyeing their hair with the chemicals and doing all this stuff where, their partners aren't, and that can be very stressful, and it's detrimental to the future of that child. So that's one
of the reasons, I was so excited to have you on, because I get a lot of parents who ask me, they have a lot of guilt. They have a child who is born with developmental delays or have autism, or, have a host of issues, gut issues, issues. And there's a lot of guilt there. Mom's blaming herself. Should I have done something better? Did I do something wrong? And they're scared. They're so scared to try again. And not because they don't love their babies, but they don't want that struggle for their child, or, you know, and when it comes to health things, I mean, obviously we want our kids to be the healthiest they can be, right? And so clearly, just like your garden out there, if you don't have a good high quality soil, you're going to have a hard time growing something, you know, beautiful, right? So that one of my questions for you is, for a lot of moms that feel like, oh, okay, I already had a child who was born with some kind of developmental delay or disorder or dysfunction or something, and they're scared to try again, and they think it's in their genes. They've a lot of people talk about the genetic factors that are associated with autism, but one of the words that you said there that triggered, and I was on board, sister friend, is the, you know, epigenetics, and how, you know, we can, you know, sort of turn on and off the expression of certain genes by our lifestyle and our diet. So could you touch maybe on that point, where what do you say to moms that are fearful? I mean, I know that you have this amazing program. We're going to talk about that, because first of all, what an awesome name. Good job, girl. That was a fun name. Trimester Zero. Like, you just hit that one on the
People
head.
didn't understand what that means because it's zero. But
I love it. And to be honest, I loved on your website, the after zero on the O, where the sperm is coming into the O. That was so cute. I watched it like 3 times. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a sperm. Like, it took me a second. I was like, oh, what is that? And then I was like, oh, it's sperm. That's cute.
it's a miracle. Like, when you study, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually a miracle that we even have gotten pregnant and have had a kid.
Right?
It takes so much for that one sperm to even make it up there,
Yeah.
then to even enter, and
Yeah.
then to replicate, which has a lot to do with the genes like
Mm-hmm.
MTHFR and cell division and thyroid, and I mean, and then it has to implant, and then it has to grow. I mean,
It's an amazing process, for real. And I found it so fascinating. I still to this day love it, and wonder, when we walk around, like, how are we all not mutated, like really bad? Because one little thing in that whole line of events could really alter our.
absolutely, of genes. I remember when 23andMe first came out, I got a kit for the whole family. It was very cheap back then. And I did my kids, and I was like, oh my God, they are mutants. Like, you know, you see the red or the orange when it's good, and you're not mutated in a
Yeah.
gene. I think of it, for those of you who are listening, I'm sure your audience knows a lot about this, but let's say, you know, you have this and you go to photocopy it, and the photocopy works and you get exactly the same copy. So that means there's no mutation. But let's say I go to photocopy this and half of it is covered. And now you go photocopy that, that's the mutation. That's what we call the SNP. So half of it is missing. It's that gene is not going to express itself properly. And if you have 2 bad copies, one from mom, one from dad, which my daughter had for the MTHFR, there is nothing now happening with that, right? So you got, that's all red. So for example, the MTHFR, or the swear word gene, I say, that one is very important for detoxifying.
Right.
And for methylation, which is like every part of our body we're carbon based, right? We're not like Star Wars. We need carbon, and MTHFR and methylation is basically the transaction that happens with all the carbons in your body. And for her, you know, you've heard of folic acid and folate, which is usually what everyone takes to not get neural tube defects. Well, she couldn't break down that folic acid because of the genetic SNP that she has. She was completely MTHFR, both bad ones from mom and dad. So I was on high amounts of folic acid, which can cause damage, right? It's not being able to be broken down. And here I was basically breathing in black mold, not knowing that it was bad for me, because I just cleaning the bathroom that we were going to renovate. I had 8 mercury fillings, which I was like, okay, everyone has fillings, no big deal. Loved my tuna, sashimis, and ate a lot of sushi. I was pretty active. I didn't drink. I didn't do drugs. So, I always thought I was healthy, but I didn't even know my own genetics. And when I say someone's healthy is if they have no symptoms. They have good energy. They wake up refreshed. They don't have fibroids. They don't have cysts. They don't get headaches. They don't have irregular cycles. They don't have clots or dark blood on day 1. They have 5 days of bleeding, and they don't know when their next period is coming. They don't have sore breasts. They're not moody or like totally, irritable before their cycle. So all of these symptoms, I had so many of them, right? But I was masked with the pill. So I thought I was fine, right? Or at least the
Well, plus you get told as a teenager, like we all have that, right? Everybody experiences
normal.
that, but you're fine. It's normal. And you're like, wait, that, you know, now as a functional medicine practitioner, we both know that's not normal. Like just
Normal.
because it's normal for the unhealthy population that we have, it doesn't make it okay, right?
Yes, and bless my mom. I remember her saying, "Oh, I had that. No worries. Like, yeah, your grandma had that. Like, oh, so and so has that. Everybody has
Yeah,
that. Of course
right,
you have
right.
cramps when you have your period. Like, what do you think? You're not supposed to have cramps?" And
Right.
then when I was in school, I was like, "No, you're not supposed to have cramps with your menses." And low blood pressure. Like,
Mhm.
how many times I would get up, especially on my period, and like literally be so lightheaded that I'd have to hold on. I even fainted in high school once because I was on my period and the pain was so bad that I literally fainted in the heat. All these are symptoms that your body is telling you something is off.
Right.
That doesn't mean they're not going to get you pregnant. That's not the point. And so whenever I talk to my colleagues who are OBGYNs and in very conventional, they're like, there's no research that that's going to make someone not get pregnant. And I'm like, that's not my point though. The point is this child going to be healthy when they're 40, when they're
Right.
50, when they're
Right.
30? Because autoimmune disease is so on the rise. Like every
Right.
other person in my practice is coming to me, probably actually every person with Hashimoto's, some sort of ANA that's positive. And I look back, diabetes, obesity. They've done so much research in Europe looking at even dad's weight before conception can affect that child's health when they're
Yeah.
40, 50, 60. So there is research out there, and it's about having a healthy child because it was so hard on my marriage. I mean, I was so depressed. I cried every week, like cried. And I lost myself. I broke. I literally broke because it wasn't, I mean, no one, the hardest thing I say is when something happens to your child, you know, anything
Right.
else I was like, bring it, God. Like I will do anything for you, but just don't hurt her. Every time she would cry, every blood draw. I mean, all the moms and dads out there who have, you know, a child who's suffering, it's 10 times worse for us. And then it's 10 times worse for the grandparents. I remember my mom and dad's life being affected, my sister's life being affected. So I had so much guilt. I was like, what did we do? I remember my husband at the time, he barely smoked, barely, like once in a blue moon, and I blamed him for that. And there's just so much blame because you're like, why isn't my heroin addict patient can have a healthy kid and I didn't? So you always are trying to find the answers. And I finally surrendered and I was like, no, there is no guilt. I'm a beautiful, loving person. And I do want to test myself though. So then I started the whole, like I said, I didn't want to go into fertility. That was definitely not an interest that I had. I was big on heart disease because that's what ran in my family and thyroid, and that's really what I wanted to focus on, but it just chose me. And I tested myself, my mercury levels were through the roof, even in my blood, like they were high,
Mm,
which it should be zero in your blood. It shouldn't be actually floating around in your blood, it should be
yeah.
stored at least. I did BPA testing. We tested all the toxins and found out that, you know, everything was being sprayed around us. There's a really good movie they've made called Overload that
Yes.
goes through this and shows you just, you know, she tests herself, the plastics, the things that the little things that you can actually change. You don't need to like take a supplement or do anything crazy. You just need to remove it from
Hmm.
your life. And yeah, so I did all that, and you know, I felt guilty because we had such a healthy child afterwards,
Mm.
and I felt like I couldn't share the story because I didn't want her to feel like I didn't do that for her. But if it
Yeah.
wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here helping, you know, all these couples.
That's right. And I'm sure there is a line of folks that are so thankful that you have this knowledge and this passion and this information for them. And one thing that I love that you said and you're pointing out is that you thought you were healthy, you felt like you were okay, and but you still, when you tested your mercury levels and you all these testing, you found some imbalances and some things that were pretty reasonably easy to modify or change to prep your body for health, for a healthy outcome, pregnancy and things It wasn't some dramatic, because I get a lot of people that think it's going to be some big red signal like, oh, your body's not healthy, and it's big bright lights saying, oh, you need to wait. But it's sometimes there are little subtle things that some of us, what I go through a lot with some of my clients and patients, is that they don't realize that they're toxic or that they feel sick because they're so used to feeling that way. And just like we had mentioned, everyone tells you, oh, that's normal. Like, PMS is normal, the bloating, the headaches, the tender breasts, the PMS, all of that is normal. It's fine. Or if you get a headache, oh, yeah, headache. Oh, you can here, pop this. You'll be fine. It's a normal, headaches are totally normal. And then when, on our side, when you realize that those are the body's way of signaling you it's not okay, something's going on and we need to address it. But we're so, in today's society, we're really bogged down. We are surrounded by toxins. We are surrounded by toxic food. The foods that are marketed towards our children are not even food at all. They're just chemically filled, altered crapola that really nobody should be eating, let alone our children whose brain and nervous system is developing at a rapid rate. Yeah. So, obviously we both share that same passion where we're trying to get people to understand that food can be medicine, but it also could be the worst form of poison that your body can take in. And if we can just sort of balance that influx of toxicity, because clearly in today's world we can't live in a bubble and we can't avoid it all, but we can certainly become aware, find out where these toxins are, if we have mold, if we have mercury, if we have imbalances, and then address those imbalances. So on that note, why don't you I guess hit some of the key issues that if a mom comes to you, and we'll use, since the majority of my audience is parents of kids on the spectrum, let's use the example that, mom comes to you and she already has a child who is on the autism spectrum. She wants to try again, but she's scared. She doesn't want to have any kind of health issues with their child. So what are your top key issues you look at?
The first thing, I wish I could go to their house. And I used to do this when, I was a new grad. I literally would get paid to go and shop with them. But I would go to their house, look at their pantry. The number one way we actually get toxins is through air. Mm-hmm. So people focus so much on diet and food. And I always say you should eat intuitively. I'm so anti-dieting, anti-keto, anti-paleo, anti-this, anti-that. You should just, when you're healthy, you will know what to eat, and you're not going to reach out for the super pesticide-full pollutants out there. But the number one thing is air quality. And the place you sleep the most, especially the future crib, where's that going to go? And all the VOCs and the off-gassing that comes from the glues that might be in the heat, or the new furniture you just bought for that baby, or
the brand new carpet in the nursery that's off-gassing toxins.
All the toxins that you breathe, you're not aware of. And so that's right. How the mold got to me. And there's research on that. Because you can't see it. It's in the air. And there's mold everywhere, right? But there's also every year, I think the number of pollutants that come out, like it's astonishing. It's like 72 new toxins every single year.
It's scary. It's really scary.
Then I do the genetic testing. So I'll run a 23andMe and then run it through a program I have, or patients can upload themselves. And then they can start to see, how are my detox genes? How are my methylation genes? How is my vitamin D gene? How are all these different genes that are important? And we don't go crazy over like, oh my God, because everyone's going to be terrified when they see how many mutations.
Right, because we all have some SNPs. We just all have some. And, can you go ahead and give the definition? Like, what is a SNP? I mean, you kind of briefly touched on it before, but help people understand how we can't really just chase every SNP by supplementing or changing this, because we would just go bonkers. So give a little.
Much training in that, and I realized, oh my God, people are actually getting more sick because they run through these programs and protocols that if you have this SNP, take this. If you're under methylated, do this. If you're over in this, and oh my God, it got to a point where I'm like, this is actually causing more harm to my patients. So for the layman, just think of it as there is never one gene that's in control of that whole department. There are thousands, hundreds, right? So if you have one bad mutation in one, the body is so intelligent. It has so many other ones that will look out for that being off or mutated or that gene not working, right? But up until now, we used to think that genetics was like 95% and then, lifestyle and things were 5%. But in breast cancer, they found that when someone takes 3 months to change their diet and lifestyle, the BRCA gene the breast cancer gene gets turned off. So then we realized, wow, that was like profound when that came out. The world was like, what? Like 95% of a gene can actually be turned off by the way you eat and the way you live your life. So that's what we call epigenetics. It means like if the light bulb, let's say, isn't working, but you didn't even turn on the light, it's not a big deal, right?
Right.
But let's say
Right.
your light bulb is working, but it's off. Well, that's also important because that thing that's turning it off might be mold, toxin, stress, inflammation. And so that's kind of the epigenetic, the way you look at it is what's turning that light bulb on. If it's a bad light bulb, what can I do to turn it off or at least make sure I'm not adding to it? So it's very complex. I mean, this is a new field. This word kind of came out 5, 7 years ago. So
Right.
there's so much we don't know. So if you're being told that let's check all your genes and there's a supplement for that, no, that's all BS. Like there is
Right.
no research behind that. So please don't waste your money on that. But it's good to know that I really have a hard time detoxifying like my daughter does. So I'm much more careful with her eating out of plastic bottles or plastic this, or if she's having pizza, let's say at a birthday party, and like, the lid from that is full of toxins, or let's say one day she wants to go to Starbucks and the lid from that, like she's going to have a much more difficult time getting rid of stuff that you and I might have no problems with, or her
Right.
brother has no problems with because his genes are much better in detoxing. So I just know that for her, when she was little, and those like what are those little fish things that everyone eats,
Oh,
let's
the goldfish.
goldfish, and I taught her, I'm like, Naya, you have to learn this has folic acid in it, you can't break that down.
Yeah.
Right? Or this bread that you want has this in it, everything is fortified with all this synthetic made
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So
Yeah.
same for the mom, same for the dad, right? So I test anyone who's had an unhealthy kid, or my ideal patient would be they haven't even started. Let's look at your genes. That it doesn't mean that you look at, oh, what runs in the family, let's test that. And I'm not genetic counseling them.
Right.
I'm just curious. Like I have the vitamin D gene. I'm like tanned. I'm always in the sun, but my D is always low. So I need extra vitamin D, right? And so do my kids. They actually need to take vitamin D at a higher level than someone who doesn't have that gene mutation. So genes are good, but again, they're just a small percentage, 10%, 20% max. They should never be the thing you look at because the body is so intelligent. It goes around it. However, our kids are going to be very mutated. So we don't want to be selfish and go, well, I got all my vaccines and I'm fine. Because that's what I used to say.
Right.
Or I took antibiotics, I'm fine. Or I've been around mold and I had mercury, I ate tuna, I'm fine. Well, I'm fine, but my kid isn't. And that kid's kid isn't going to be. So we have to think of the future generations and do our very best to be in the best shape we can be so that they end up having an okay life when they're 40, 50, 60, and their kids do as well.
I love that you said that because that was on my list here of things to have you address, because many people think that you just get your genes passed down from mom and dad and then you start fresh and then you mate and then your kids are a totally new clean slate. But that's not the case. That even the next generations down can still be affected by, grandma up here. You can still have
Yes.
downward effects, and most people don't connect that dot. They don't realize that grandma's genes or her lifestyle, I guess, her, everything she's doing actually affects
Yeah,
future generations, not just the
exactly.
next
I love
generation.
that you brought that up because I think my grandma who's doing thriving, she had my mom when she was 16. That means that I was inside my grandmother when she was pregnant. So you have your daughter's eggs in you if you are having a daughter. Not only are you carrying her, you're carrying all her eggs. That means your future grandkid is in you as well. So you're affecting two generations. So
Right.
she aged so well. I mean, she was already young, so she had really good eggs, and same with my mom, she had me young. So people always ask me, like, I have so many things that run in our family and I'm doing okay. And honestly, I say it's because my mom and my grandma were young. And nowadays we're having moms have babies later.
Right.
So egg quality does go down. Men are going later. These toxins, BPAs. I mean, my grandmother barely probably had any of that stuff. Everything was in
Right.
glass, but we would go and get everything fresh. Kind of in Italy, I remember like every day they go to the store to get food to make that night. Like nothing is stored, nothing is
Right.
packaged. And so all of that stuff makes a difference. So when I used to go to people's home, I would say like, I want everything that's in your house to go bad within a day or two. That's when unfortunately with the quarantine right now, that's just not how it
That
was.
makes it a little bit hard.
It makes it harder. But in general, you want food that's going to go bad. That means it has enzymes. It's alive,
Right.
right? You want a live food. So you want whole foods. You want to eat a rainbow in a week, right? Blues and greens and reds. And so that's why I'm very like anti, you got to get your omega 3s and your zinc and your iodine. What does that mean? Like
Right.
eat food, eat stuff from the sea, eat stuff that comes from a tree that's grown in
We've
a.
really just gotten really far away from understanding the power of food. I think most kids don't even know where food comes from. They just assume it comes from the grocery store from a box. I've done this. I've done some counseling with kids and talked at schools, and I'll have posters and ask the question like, hey, where it's a picture of butter, so where did this come from? And I mean, 9 times out of 10 they picked the picture of wheat or just a grocery store. We are so disconnected from food. And I think the piece there that I try to pass on to people too is that the love and care that goes into growing and cultivating and making food, and the love you put into it, and the heart you put in it, and the sort of appreciation and affection you have to that food that you grew, whether it be, a plant in the ground or whatever. There's something about that. I think that our whole generation right now is just missing, the whole push button, your dinner's ready, idea. It sounded cool at the time, but now we're seeing, oh, that wasn't such a good idea because that's not food. That's not nourishment. Instead, that's just frankenfood that's causing inflammation and aggravation and disruption in the force. And the sooner people start to connect that dot, and then, there's that whole kind of a little bit of tough love where you just tell parents like, hey, you're going to grow a human being up in here. We need to like take a second to realize what you're doing. Everything you're doing affects, and that includes stress, sleep, and lifestyle choices. And I love that you're bringing up, dad's involvement in that, because for the most part, that's not brought up, right? No one talks about that, but how it affects, the whole process. They're half of the genes that are being, brought on the table.
So much we don't know. Like you're right. You're making me realize, yeah, we had goats. We literally, I remember like we got fresh milk. I remember we had chickens and hens, and we would get the raw egg, like literally hot from the hen. And like now I'm thinking, God, they weren't worried about salmonella, that everything was fresh. And gosh, like I remember her like literally cutting the chicken's head off, like that we were growing, like everything came. Definitely sorry for the
We might traumatize some children with that right now, but it's, that's nature, right? And we've really stepped away from that.
Everything literally was fresh, and
Yeah.
that makes a difference. And
Yeah.
now we have dads sitting in Teslas with their testicles surrounded by battery.
Yeah.
And we don't know what that's going to do, but it can't be good to sit in all that EMF and like you have a battery under you.
More and more studies are coming out on that, and they're pretty disturbing. We're seeing some effects we don't want to see.
With low testosterone, and I can guess their car. And I'm like, do you own a Tesla? Because they'll be like 25 and they have low testosterone, and they have.
And no one's told them. That's the part that's really rough. The average, conventional medicine doc, they're not educated in this. They're like, they'll call it, wacko science, that, oh, there's no evidence of that, and that has nothing to do with it.
European studies, you do see that there is studies on fertility, the ovaries, cell phones on the breasts, on the ovaries, and laptops, for example, and how much now that's our world, and even these kids. So if my kid is already unhealthy, I'm going to be even more careful that they're not around that, because it changes the cell. The way cell phones, I learned, I had a man who came down from LA and tested my home. And I did this after I had my daughter, because I realized the way we had her bed was right out at the outlet, and like the amount of EMFs that I didn't know these things. I didn't know stuff in naturopathic school then. I think they're teaching them now. But I learned that in the US, the way they okay this is if they put a device in like a doll, if it doesn't heat her up or heat up the doll and actually burn her, then it's said it's fine. But in Europe, they're actually looking at much more advanced ways of how this is damaging the cells. That's why
Mm.
there's no cell phone towers allowed in schools. It's banned. Here,
Wow.
they're like everywhere inside
They're
the
everywhere
schools, you
else.
know, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's becoming aware, I would say, for the moms and dads. Just really, I love what I did that helped me with trimester zero is you're actually not, it's not even just about having a healthy baby. It's changing your lifestyle so that then you can teach your kids all the stuff you know. Like my kids, they knew, everyone used to make fun of me. My son used the word toxic when he was 2.5. And everyone was like, what? Of course, saying that's toxic, like the receipts, you know, when he would,
Yes.
I don't touch it. I'm like, don't touch that, that's toxic.
Mm.
The receipts you get from the cashiers, that has been studied. New jeans, new clothes, it's been studied. The amount of chemicals that rises in the blood after wearing a brand new jean. So I love it because there's so much research on in environmental
Oh, I love that. There's so much evidence now from everything from, there's so many nutrition studies and lifestyle studies. There's so much evidence out there. Now we just need to get it mainstream where people, and it's hard. People love their conveniences and their push button meals and things like that. And it takes some effort. No one's saying it's going to be easy,
I
because
do it
if
too.
you want to make changes right now and be healthy, you are going against the grain for sure, because you can't walk into a restaurant and get a meal that is nourishing and healthy for you. You can make some modifications to get closer,
Yeah.
but in the society we live in and the way we live, but if you were to try to buy a home right now that was, no mold, low EMF, all the time, it's not affordable. Like it's not affordable. It's kind of crazy. I know a few people who've done it and they have spent a lot of money to prep their house for this, and everyone has that access. Hopefully someday soon these things, like, they do become cheaper and more readily available and that kind of thing. But right now I love to pass on to people, get educated.
Yeah.
Educate yourself. Don't go with the stream. Don't be a sheeple. Don't worry about else. You learn about your body first, understand how it works. Like, I think you and I share, we just had that innate curiosity for it. We both, this is what we want, and we're studying it. I remember in my under years when I was so excited to finally have had to get into the cadaver lab and to take the upper level anatomy and physiology. I was so excited. And I remember a gal looking at me and she was like, oh, hell no, I'm not taking. I'm like, wait, what? Like, I was so confused. I thought for sure that everybody wanted to take this class, right? We all have a body. You want to know how this works, right? And when you start learning an under level, like the lower level biologies and how a cell works and how we got all these cells, you're like, what? I thought it was so cool. And then I really kind of learned that I was just a geek out about it, that not everybody has this interest. And now as an adult, when I'm trying to help people, and when I get the question asked to me, so what is a carbohydrate? And I'm just like, what? Or like when I start to express some of the toxins that are in their environment or in food, and I get that deer in a headlight look, like, what are you talking about?
It
And
has to be pain. I love how Tony Robbins always said people don't change and they don't make that effort to learn or care when there's no pain. Like,
yeah.
why would I? If I have, like, I have friends, you know, who are totally not like me and they're the complete opposite. And to them, they're like, well, I got pregnant easy, I have healthy kids.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, they're not as healthy as
Right.
you think they are because you are suppressing their eczema every week with a steroid. That is not health, but to
Yeah.
them it is because their dermatologist has managed it for now, right? And that's a
Right.
2-year-old or a 5-year-old. Then what's next?
Right.
Right? Or then they have all these asthma attacks, but they have an inhaler, so they think they're fine, they're managed. So it's different way of thinking about
Right.
health. I always ask, like, what is health to you? Is it that you don't have a symptom? Is that what health
Mm.
means?
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, that's not health. To me, it's having energy, not being dependent on any medication, and also feeling vital, feeling that I'm not going to have autoimmune disease 10 years, or my kid's going to be okay and they're not going to have symptoms later.
Mm-hmm. And
Um,
prevention is so much easier than reversal, right?
Yes, and sometimes
Absolutely.
it's just so much work to
Mm-hmm.
reverse. You know, my
Yep.
cancer patients,
Mm.
it's just they're like, oh, I wish I hadn't had that soy latte every single, year because they had BRCA gene, let's say, and they had an estrogen positive cancer before. I just had a patient like this, and those
Mm.
3 glasses of wine every night to relax because I was like, there's an increase 60% if you have more than 3 glasses a week. That's what the research,
Mm.
but they'll blame it on something else because we want
Sure.
our conveniences, right?
Right.
So To go back to your question, air is huge and it doesn't have to be expensive, but at least in your car and in your house, have a HEPA filter and breathe at least good air where you can control it. Second, it's water. The amount of stuff, and my kids are learning this in school, the pills and the things, and they're like, why does it end up in our water? Like, why can't the bad water go into the earth?
Right, yeah.
Fresh water. I'm like, well, no, that's just not how it works. So get a good, Brita's not good enough, but get a really good filter that you're gonna have forever. So investing in these things, people say it's expensive, but then they'll go spend money on clothes and shoes and purses and doing their hair and things that they think are okay to spend money on. But getting a good reverse osmosis, remineralized water put under your sink for life that you own is going to be worth it, or at least the chlorine shower where your kid's going to be bathing every night. So water,
right? Because speaking of that chlorine, when that chlorine gets hot and it turns, especially the bath water, I mean, we know we're all taking a hot shower, that chlorine turns toxic, and you're letting your kids or yourself, you're breathing that. So it's a very simple thing to attach to the shower head. It really is simple.
Yeah, my friend was over a few weeks ago and she took a shower. She's like, oh my God, my skin, what's with the water? And I was like, oh yeah, we have reverse osmosis for the whole house. And you don't even realize your hair, your skin, your nails are affected by this chlorine that affects your thyroid, your iodine.
And it affects everything. Chlorine literally kills DNA.
But for having a kid, iodine deficiency is so huge, because that's why like Japanese babies have the highest IQ in research, because they have so much iodine. They eat so much miso and seaweed and seaweed snacks. And so iodine is down because we don't eat a lot of those. And I don't even know how much I want sea stuff anyways with all the chemicals in the ocean.
Right.
But getting these things tested, and I think that's what my passion is. My first module in the course is so intense, and people always are like, oh my God, that's a lot of stuff. And I go, well, this is important. Like, how nutriently sound are you? How good is your gut health? We start at the gut, and I know everyone talks about this 1,000 times every day, but
there's a reason.
The reason is not just for nutrients, it's because your immune system is in the gut, and that's the number one illness on the rise. So more kids are having immune disorders, right? Eczema is an immune issue. Asthma is an immune issue. Ear infections, coronavirus, fighting effect, it's all immunity, autoimmune diseases. Everything has to be with how good your microbiome is, all the bugs in you that you pass on. So I always start with the gut and test the gut. Look at the stool, look at your poops, look at how you feel. Are you bloated? Are you gassy? Or do you have diarrhea? Are you constipated? That is not allowed in my practice.
Right. Gotta poop. We gotta poop every day. That we need to get that out.
Twice, and people have diarrhea and they don't realize they're constipated. Constipated means you go once, it's not complete. You go again, it's not complete. You should have one big snake, as my kids say, one long big snake, and then you're done. And that's a good bowel movement. It's thick, it's brown, it doesn't have food in there, it doesn't float. So gut health is very important, and that's where most people I work on first. And then we look at toxins. So we'll look at BPAs and all these chemicals that most people can't even pronounce. And I'm like, half of that is in your sperm. Like, you're going to pass that on. So the meconium, or the first poop of the baby, nowadays, the amount of chemicals in there, that's what makes me guilty, right? Because I passed on all my mercury to my baby. And that's where most of our mercury comes from, actually, which is neurotoxic. It's bad for the brain. And you get most of that from mom. So it's important how much mercury you have. So I definitely test that. But I'll do it, and your listeners can just go to aimforwomen.com/TQ for toxin questionnaire. It's a free questionnaire they can download, and they can just do it and see how many yeses do they score. If you've got more than 3 yeses on there, then that means you should probably do a toxic screen and look at the toxins. If you have none of those and you're pretty good, then you don't need to spend the money on that. But it's not even expensive. It's like $200-300, and you get to see everything.
Oh, it's such a worthwhile investment, because this whole topic, this whole phys, to me, it's so fascinating. It's frustrating and fascinating at the same time. It's frustrating because it's awesome that we can identify these things and we can make changes and we can use epigenetics, we can do all that stuff, but it's also very frustrating because in order to do those things, you really have to go against the grain and kind of go against what the norms and what everyone else is doing. You got to take the time to educate yourself. But we're so lucky to have people like you out there that have pulled together this information and this program. I think your program is so amazing. And so why don't you, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of women out there listening right now going, oh gosh, like maybe I'm not prepped and ready for this. So why don't you give us a little background maybe on.
Just start with air and water. I mean, I
Okay.
had to break it down. So what it is every week we focus on one actionable small step because
Love
it's
it.
too overwhelming. There's no way
Yeah.
I even do myself all of those things, right?
Right.
So we
Right.
don't start with hormone balancing. Well, what does that even mean? Everyone talks about balance your hormones and fix your gut
Oh,
and
it's so complicated
microbiome
too.
and genetics, and there's 1,000 things to do. So in the course, it's not for practitioners. So I'm not going to geek out on all the stuff that we're talking about today. I'm just going to tell you what to do.
Love it.
Because that's what everyone wants to know. Okay,
Yeah.
I get it, Dr. Demeri. Well, what do you want me to do? What should I eat? What should I take?
Yeah.
Which water filter should I get? What should I get from the air? What do you use for EMF? What do you use? So it's very easy from all over the world, Australia, Europe, Asia. I have people from everywhere, and I help them say, you have PCOS, you need an inositol. You have blood sugar issues, you need to do this kind of workout. We need to put you on a keto diet to lose weight and balance your blood sugar. So it's very individualized, and that's what's key. What I see, a lot of women, they're low blood pressure like me, they tend to be on the cold side, they tend to run on the anemic side, and then they're doing the medical medium celery juice every morning and then making themselves even cooler, having diarrhea, and now even weaker because they lost all the minerals. It's a diuretic. And I'm like, that's the last thing you should be doing. But your husband, who's hot and is the opposite of you and has a lot of internal heat, that's the perfect thing for him to do to help him flush out and get his blood pressure lower or feel cooler. So I go through the Chinese medicine, blood deficiency, different kinds. We all have different disposition. So we have to eat according to the way we look, the symptoms. So if I had a lot of acne and I have a lot of cysts in my ovaries and I'm a little overweight and I tend to be on the swollen side, I eat very differently, and I'm going to recommend a very different diet or foods to eat versus someone who's like me, who's very cold and doesn't have acne and tends to be more dry and scanty periods, right? Versus someone else who has very clotty periods. And so you have to individualize it. And unfortunately in science, I was just listening to an OBGYN who says a vegan diet is the best diet for fertility. If you look at these research, they group people, right? And there's so much bias that goes into how they do these studies, but people don't know that. They just read this person's book and they think this is true, but it's not rocket science to know that you are different than your friend. I am different than you. I have my genetics. I'm Persian. Well, did my grandparents eat a lot of sushi? No, they hate sushi, right? So I'm eating very differently than my Japanese friend. That's also going to affect, my overall health. So I do individualize it, and I try to say, what's the most important thing? The most important thing is to remove things that aren't good for you. Just say no. Instead of thinking of what you should do, because that can be very overwhelming. So if I say, go gluten-free, you should be dairy-free, you should be sugar-free, you should be soy-free, egg-free, lectin-free, histamine-free. I mean, it could go on forever.
It can. It's a long list.
That's not practical. And I want you to enjoy life. Like food is creativity, right? You are creating life. So we want that second chakra. Like I want you to dance. I want you to like bake. I want you to nest. I want you to work less. I want your mind to be calm, and I don't want you to be in that doing mode because that's very yang energy. That's the provider, that's the masculine side, which many females I see in practice, that's where they're at. And that's why their periods will shrink. They'll get lighter or heavier or shorter, right? So we don't want a short cycle. We don't want a 24-day cycle. We don't want your periods to go from 5 days to 4 days to 3 days. These are all signs that you're aging faster, right? So if a 38-year-old is already there, that means they don't have enough progesterone. And progesterone has to do with good egg quality. And it is so important for preventing a miscarriage. So if someone's had more than 1 or 2 miscarriages, recurrent miscarriages, that's what I look at is, have you even checked your progesterone 7 days post-ovulation? Do you even have enough, right? And many people have, oh, my doctor said I was fine. They tested my FSH, it was 3. I'm like, 3 when? When did they test it? It wasn't even done on the right date.
Right.
So that's the first week. The first 2 weeks, I'm telling you, is basically doing the right tests and then removing things that aren't good for you. And then we tweak the diet. Then we tweak the supplements. Supplements I leave last because they should be only added, right?
Once the other stuff's addressed, right? Yeah, because
Everyone thinks I'm taking a prenatal, I'm good. I'm like, a prenatal is nothing.
right.
Prenatal's not barely doing anything. It's
Yeah.
not there to help with the baby's health, right?
Hmm.
It's to make sure
Right.
you're getting enough, but you want to be in optimal health before.
Right. A systemic optimal health.
Systemic, exactly. And half
Yes.
of it, it's not even getting absorbed, right? So
Right. Well,
once,
if you don't have a healthy gut, how are you going to absorb the nutrients that are required for all of these, functions that are happening? So yeah, you got to address the whole system. Now I know you have given so many awesome tidbits here. It's just so much information. I know anyone listening, I have a feeling some of you will go back and listen again because there were so many awesome bombs dropped throughout this conversation. So why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners where else they can get help from you and your course and where we can find you.
I'm so active on Instagram at
Okay.
Dr. Demeri, so Drdemeri. You can find me there, ask me questions. I do tons of posts, and my whole purpose in life is to give you the information you need. So, of course, you can look at my course, trimester0course.com, and my website, aimforwomen.com as well. And yeah, I'm happy to see you guys mostly on Instagram. That would be a good place to catch me.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for all of that information. So for my listeners who feel like you just had a sip from a fire hose, you just did. That was a lot of really amazing, awesome information. I really encourage you to go back and listen to this again. Hopefully we'll get lucky and Dr. Demeri will come back to us again and we can go over, we could sit here all day. I could sit here all day and go over this. So, but for now, folks, go ahead and visit Dr. Demeri on her Instagram, or you can also go to aimforwomen.com, so aimforwomen.com, and that's where you can also access her Trimester Zero course online. So this can be, taken anywhere at any time. It's an amazing program. I highly recommend it. I think this is a lot of information for us to soak in. So having, the guidance of a practitioner who's been there, done that, is invaluable. So I highly recommend you guys going there and checking that out. Thank you for tuning in to another Nutrition Intervention Show episode. And if you loved this, please subscribe and share. And we'll see you next time.